And a state cannot be a state if it is not guided by the principles of the rule of law. We can only regard that state as a pariah state. Unfortunately, this country is slowly sliding into that pariah state due to the collapse and um, overwhelming collapse of the governing system and structures in this country. It's on that basis, therefore, after our previous space, that I and TG sponsored a public a petition that is still doing rounds in our social spaces, and the petition itself is calling for a self introspection of this country and the affairs of this country. Among them is calling Kenyans to rise up and call for actions, and especially in matters regarding the Adani issue. Further to that, today we filed a constitutional petition in the Constitutional Court that is raising very weighty issues. If you've read the petition, it has um, captured two issues. One, we are making an assumption that the agreement and the consensus executions have been finalized. The other limp is we are making an assumption that they may be in a process of being finalized or executed. In all those aspects, when you look at the constitution, it contemplates a scenario whereby one can move to court to uphold and protect the constitution from violation on an anticipated event or an event that has already occurred. That is under Article 258 of the Constitution, as read together with Article 259 of the Constitution. And why are we doing this? We are doing this because we have a rogue government, a government that does not believe in the doctrines of transparency and accountability. If we were in a democratic state, that as perhaps people might want us to believe, this information would have been laid bare for all and sundry to access. But you can see the process is being held in a very clandestine manner, shrewd concealment of material facts, so as to frustrate any person who might want to go to file and carry that process. And that's why you saw the LSK and the human rights taking the procedure that they took. They took the procedure of judicial review, which is completely different from the procedure that you have initiated. The procedure of judicial review seeks or looks at interrogating the process of the decision making. Was it reasonable? Was it rational? Was it lawful? And that's why you can see the court granted them stay orders. And if you can look at those orders, the order speaks that leave shall operate as a stay, meaning that due to the lack of the material facts, one may not be, they were not in a position to move through the constitutional mechanism to seek for declarations. Fortunately, we are able, TG was and Mweru were quite instrumental in giving us the relevant information. As we speak, members must understand that this is not an anticipated issue. There is already existing feasibility study that was initiated and carried out by the Adani group. That feasibility study was shared to me by Mweru. Secondly, it tells you if there is a feasibility study, then how was it initiated if the deal has not materialized? It tells you that the deal was consummated and it is at the process of the implementation. Subsequently, there has been an issue that was brought out by Senator Onyonka, that the question of the privatization of our airports and the other facilities like the KQ or the KAE, they have been subject of debate before the National Assembly. If you look at the report dated the 17th of June 2019, when His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta attempted to privatize um, the same way William Ruto Arap Tama is doing, you realize that the National Assembly deliberated over that issue and came to a conclusion that there are some strategic national infrastructures that attracts question of national security that you cannot either lease, privatize, or alienate them for whatsoever purpose away from the reach of Kenyans. That tells you the reason why Mr. William Ruto Arap Tama is failing to initiate the process of approval by Parliament, because Parliament has already made that conclusion. And that brings me to the question that was put, the PPA and the question of public participation. We must all remember that the Public-Private Partnership Act is an amendment, and it was done and initiated by Mr. William Ruto Arap Tama for purposes of making sure that he alienates strategic infrastructures away from the people of Kenya without their participation. If you look at Section 3 and Section 4 of that particular act, it has completely muted the voice of Kenyans. That Kenyans have no voice when it comes to the manner in which he chooses to implement the private-public partnership. And that is one of the gravements that is pending before court. And that is why you realize that in all these halubalus and all these shenanigans, Kenyans have not been consulted. We have not been brought to the knowledge of what is happening. But you also realize that under Section 4 of the same Act, there is a proviso that public Procurement and Disposal Act will also be applicable where the state itself has initiated some investment. Adani are not coming to build a new airport so that then they can completely be precluded or excluded from the armpits of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act. They are coming to proceed or to carry on with a going concern uh, perspective. And the Act says they cannot privatize anything under the Private Partnership Act if the government itself has invested in that particular project. And that is why information is being concealed from us. And that is why we're asking the High Court to interpret for us whether that can actually be initiated when we Kenyans have invested in the construction of the airport. But the PPA contemplates a scenario whereby if the project itself is a new project, then there can be an initiation of the public-private partnership and exclusively for the benefit of the members of the public through various models. That is not what is with us today. And the model that is contemplated by the PPPA is either a boot, that is build, own, operate, and transfer, or a BOO, build, own, and operate. As we speak, we are not aware of the model that Mr. William Ruto Arap Tama has initiated. It tells you that it's completely be alienated from our reach. Further to that, our petition has raised another issue. When you list this petition, this airport for 30 years, and when you look at Article 10, which speaks about the doctrines of sustainable development, and when you look at the preamble to our constitution, which speaks about giving ourselves this constitution and the future generation, then you incorporate the two fundamental principles of intergenerational and intragenerational equity. Is it, does the bill contemplate the inter and intragenerational equity principles when alienating this property? And if it does, how does it then square out for the period of 30 years? Those are some of the issues we are raising in our petition. The other subsequent issue we're also raising is, can a strategic investment such as JKIA be alienated from the people without their participation? And if that so happens, what happens to the aspect and the idea of our sovereignty? Because our argument is that the JKIA and other airports domiciled within the republic are symbols of our sovereignty. So when you alienate them without involving the people, you're simply saying that you're compromising our sovereignty and our heritage. Those are some of the issues we are raising in that particular petition. But again, to go back to the question of the public participation and why the PPPA has deliberately refused to invite members of the public to give or to weigh in their view, through their views, is to make sure that we are kept out of reach of what Mr. William Ruto Arab Tamar is doing. And I'm using the word Arab Tamar deliberately. Tamar meaning a greedy person, because he wants to completely own everything in this country. So we are waiting and we anticipating that the court will render itself tomorrow for purpose of directions. But again, the deal as it is, and if you look at the feasibility study that was shared to us by Mweru, it tells you that these guys have advanced. For example, today during the strike by the workers at the airport, I have heard from the news that they have given documents in respect to that particular process or deal. Then it tells you that Arab Tamar has advanced this deal to the exclusion of all Kenyans. Tony, I'll pen off and perhaps wait for further questions or clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakili. And listening to you and listening to how this government has been working from when it was sworn into office, one can't help but notice the pattern of secrecy and deceit in being their primary source of governing people. Keep it away from them until it's too late for them or until someone finds out. But as we contemplate that, account, I can see the name, accountability. The mic is yours.
Hello, Anthony. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. So for me, I've not followed that much the Adani saga because I've been busy with other things. Also, I'm not a professional lawyer like others. So for me, my point as just a normal Kenyan, what he will say about this deal is, these people should be should when they come to Kenya and start buying things, they should go through the due process. If they go through the back channels, a time will come when when everything will be seized from them and they will be put in jail. So I don't understand why that is not in their head. For me, as a normal Kenyan, that's where I see this going. As you go through the court process and the court comes up with a judgment and decisions, I think at some point we will have to jail these guys and everyone who helped them and everyone who tried to give them the directions on what to do and who to bribe or who to give money to. So they should tread carefully. This is not their country, and I don't understand if they are adults. They are not adults. That's for me. Thank you.
Thank you, accountability. Now, as you were making a submission, I took time to look at examples of good PPE deals. And I'll give you an example. When Elon Musk wanted to build a factory in China to do his electric cars, the deal was structured with quantifiable numbers. So he was told, we'll allow you to be tax exempt, but he was told on condition that you employ 100,000 people from this region, and that number should keep on growing as the factory and the demand grows. So when you look at the Adani deal, there's nowhere you are told, they're only saying we shall employ people. Adani, being a person who has built airports, and that being one of his specialities, he should be able to tell people that the Adani deal, when I come in here, I'm going to create, he should give a number that these are jobs I'm going to create, this is the tax I'm going to pay, this is the amount of impact we shall have in terms of other sectors of this economy, like the steel, cement, people who sell stone. You know, they should have such quantifiable numbers that I'll be buying this number of metric tons of stone, concrete, and all that. That way, people get to look at numbers rather than look at a story. Another thing you notice with this government is everything they do is shrouded in mystery. So, Mwero, you can share a little bit on the document that you shared with Ndegwa. As I'm trying to find Wakili Kibe. If you could request the mic from your end, then that pulls you up automatically. But Mwero, you can be giving us the insight into the document that you have so that Kenyans are able to hear about it.
Yeah, sure. I also sent you the Private Practice Act of 2021 in case there are people here who also are interested in reviewing it, because I also feel like people need to review that and have an understanding as to why this deal why Ruto seems to, or his government seems to have been extremely confident in carrying out this deal the way they have. But in regards to the Adani deal, I'll also share that with you so we can share that in the space for people that want to also review that. But it's very saddening, the fact that for those that have not read the deal, they're projecting their main reason for initiating this is the fact that Adani is, according to the deal, claiming they're going to offer expertise, innovation, a commitment to excellence and deliver value and quality, and above all, sustainability. In this same deal, they have on page 79 to like through 81 of the deal, the version I have received, they also list some of the dealings they have, and they do a lot of port operations, mining, they do a lot of power generation, renewable energy, gas infrastructure, supply chain, real estate. They're also involved in cement, media, a lot of stuff. And if you've paid keen attention, besides this whole airport saga that is currently going on, you can tell that there's also been documents released, which I cannot confirm whether they're actually viable, that also suggests that they've also started getting into the power industry in Kenya. So my point has always been, when you see such a scandal arise, you have to ask yourself, is this it, or is there more involvement? Because when I read this document, there was a lot of reference to 2019. And my assumption was this deal was initially, they started working on this a long time ago. This is not something that just started happening or they've started working on. So it was very relevant to pay attention to that 2019, because it feels like they started working on this then, which makes sense that there was also a similar deal that was being introduced in regards to Kenya Airways that of course failed. Which also now, if you start connecting the dots, you sort of now see why all this is happening the way it's happening. There's a pattern here. So the initial introduction in regards to KQ failed. Then in 2021, they proposed a new Public Partnership Act, and it's very appalling how malicious these people can be. But let me just go back to the deal itself. So the deal is proposing that, which is common sense. Everybody in the world knows that this is where we are all heading. There's going to be a passenger traffic growth. And according to the deal, they're stating that it's going to be an increase by 4.9% by 2050, which is going to be an increase, which they give it a number of 32 million by then. At the moment, our airport is servicing about 8.5 million a year. But by 2050, if this deal goes through, their proposition is we'll be having about 32 million by 2054. So they want to invest, the investment amount is about 2.05 billion US dollars, which honestly, if we compare to how much as a country we're generating in revenue, that is honestly, and this is in 30 years. This is how much money they're looking into invest in 30 years. But if you look at how much we're generating as a country in revenue, this is not a lot of money. We can essentially afford to renovate and run our own airport. As a matter of fact, we can even afford to build another one. This is an economy that is generating up to 2.4 trillion, and this is the fiscal year of 2023 to 2024. So when we talk about like, yeah, we cannot afford to fix our own airport, that doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to resort to using profanity because some of these things just take you to that. However, I mean, as we all know, our politicians only operate from a basis of personal interest, corruption, blah 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 blah. So, case an example, if you look at Ruto's companies and the portfolio of his companies, it aligns pretty well and very parallel to Adani's. He's involved in hospitality, in real estate, agriculture, in, insurance, all those things. So let's keep in mind that he owns a company called Martini Limited. I don't know whether that is still up and running. That he is involved in real estate. He is involved in a lot of other things, and mostly just pay attention to his stocks. Like he's a shareholder in Kenya Airways, where he has about 80,000 shares. Safaricom, Hassan has about 400,000 shares. So my point is that he has to have some form of benefit in the long run. And personally, I mean, the only way I can rationalize this is I think at this point in time he's realized, yeah, his next candidacy as president is actually in real jeopardy and he might lose. And he wants to create systems that generate the same amount of money he's been stealing in the event that he ends up being out of office. And this is one of the ways. As I had mentioned earlier, I was waiting on people to continue joining the space and we have more speakers, so I can get into details about some things that I was reviewing, and I realized today that are pretty eye-opening, and I think I appreciate the effort that Ndegwa and Tony are doing where they've filed this lawsuit. But there's also more legal things that we realize that based on this Public Partnership Act of 2021, it's basically grounds to vetoing this deal. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense how some of these people can. I mean, the only way to explain what is happening is the fact that they've taken so much money for them to agree to sign a deal that creates so much exemptions in taxes for this company. They have even, I mean, visas. I mean, they're just going to open the gateway for Indians to move into Kenya and just take up jobs that we don't have enough of. So I mean, Tony, I'll just hand it back to you while we wait for more people and maybe give the other speakers a chance to speak.
Thank you, Mweru. So does this mean we are looking at state capture? Those are some of the things this very government campaigned against, that we will not see people line their pockets with money based on information they have in terms of dealings. And pretty much it seems like what is happening. The more you look at this government, the more you realize that they are the exact replica of what they were campaigning against. They promised people that we will not see any more auctioning happening. But as we look today, the economy is on a free fall. And I really don't know. Mero, the more we have close to 400 people listening in. And I would really urge people to request for the microphone so that we have a more interactive space. Because right now, I only have one request. And I'm trying to see if any other person has requested and maybe I'm not seeing them.
I have a question because, like I said, we are in the diaspora. So when I read this Public Participation Act, I have a question for our lawyer Ndegwa. So under Section 5, it indicates that if there's any conflict that it comes up, this public act, this provisions act, is basically going to outlaw any other law that exists. Like the whatever is stipulated in this Public Partnership Act is what stands. Nothing stipulated by other laws or provisions shall prevail. How should we interpret this? So do we just go based on this and forgo the Constitution? Do you mind sort of just tell me your thoughts on this?
Thank you once more, Tony. Um, and I'm happy that we have more than 400 people listening to this space. Again, it tells you that we are determined to be a people and that we are going to claim our rightful place in this God's kingdom. That we are not going to live as we are being forced to live just because one person has decided to lead this country through his own whims, wishes, and aspiration. We'll keep on reminding Mr. William Ruto Arap Tama that this country must and will only be governed by the rule of law. Will not allow the rule of men to govern us. And that's why you can see Section 5 was designed for a particular purpose. So that and of course you must remember that this act, the amendment of this act came before the enactment of the Privatization Act. So they were focusing somewhere. So they are using parliament to legislate so that they can then steal from us. So the other weakest link that is existing in this country, that is perpetuating this mischief, that is creating the opportunities of Mr. William Ruto and his cadres to steal from us, is being facilitated by parliament through legislation. How would somebody legislate Section 5 in a free and democratic state and tell us that the provisions of that act will prevail? It will prevail as against which other act? If you look at Article 227 of the Constitution, that article does not contemplate an enactment of an act of parliament like the Public Private Partnership Act that will compromise the principles of accountability, transparency, the rule of law, and all those aspects, and social justice. So Section 5 is designed to make sure that by the time we are done with Mr. William Ruto Arap Tama, he'll have confiscated all that which he thinks. And that is why you can see the media is reporting that the Adani deal has ousted the jurisdiction of the court. They are saying that this deal must flow smoothly, must be immunized from public protest, must be immunized from being challenged in court, and that if we challenge it, there'll be damages accruing therefrom. But how can damages accrue from an illegality? If the contract was illegal ab initio, how will damages accrue? How can an agreement outlaw or oust the jurisdiction of the court? It tells you that the enactment of Section 5 was designed to make sure that these guys steal from us. Fortunately, that is one of the sections that we are challenging. The constitutionality of that section. Can it apply in the current existing constitutional dispensation? Those are some of the issues we have put and challenged the High Court to tell us. When you say that Section 5 the act will prevail against other acts, you can only say that the PPP Act will prevail as against the Public Procurement and Disposal Act. And if you look at the level of transparency being created by the Public Procurement and Disposal Act is so high as opposed to the Public-Private Partnership Act. Remember, Adani says that this was privately initiated proposal. That tells you a privately initiated proposal is somebody who is soliciting. Mr. William Ruto went to India, met with this Adani, and told them, I am intending to do this, initiate it. What that means is that they exempted us from the advantage of the expression of interest, because the expression of interest would have been carried in the papers for all and sundry to know, so that any person who is interested in that project can then bid. But you can see Mr. William Ruto Arap Sama decided to go to India and solicit for this particular engagement. Where does that leave transparency? Where does that leave the doctrine of accountability? Where does that leave the doctrine of the people's participation? Because at least you would have been able to know that the government is initiating this process and perhaps would have intervened at that particular time of the expression of interest stage. But we shall tell him and remind him again that Kenya will survive many of us. Thank you, Tony. I'll still wait again. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakili. Muru, I've just made Meru my co-host so that if there's any request I can see, she can see it on her end. But I see we are also joined with new speakers. I see Wakili Ekuru Okot is on this space, and Kibe has his hand raised for quite a while. So Wakili, Wakili, the mic is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony, for hosting this show. I have followed the discussion, and thank you, Ndegwa, for the explanations you've given, and I've enjoyed the comments by the other speakers. I think I'll just make a couple of issues because I think many of the points have been made and others will be made. The first thing, and I am aware that this matter is pending in court, is that there are a couple of issues to be said. Number one, I have read the government statement that has been issued by the spokesman, Mr. Mwaura, in which they are trying to say that this is just a proposal, but I think we have seen this before. When the Kenyan rise to oppose something, we know that many steps towards execution of this conspiracy against the Kenyan people and the country are already being taken to ensure the handing over of our airport in November this year. And therefore, this denial amounts to nothing, and the Kenyan people must maintain the pressure. Otherwise, this could just be a tactical retreat. Having said that, the points I needed to make are these. Number one is that even in a country where you have decided to adopt privatization in order to manage your debts, it has become public policy, is that there is always the extent to which privatization can be carried out. You cannot privatize everything. And that is why even at home, if you want to manage problems and something has to be sold, probably the family home would be the last one to be sold. It can't be the first option. And therefore, in a normal country in which a normal leadership would be in power, you would expect that JKIA would be the last public amenity that would be privatized, if at all we must privatize things in the manner in which we are proposing to do. The second issue is this. Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is a national security institution. And I believe this is why earlier in the year, a few months ago, 1 or 2 months ago, when people tried to demonstrate, you even deployed GSU. A couple of people are killed on the way on the basis that it is a protected area. Therefore, which insanity is this, that suddenly a protected area is being given to a Mzungu fraudster from an Indian fraudster from India on the silver platter and on sweetheart deals, under which they are even saying that if you stop any of the initiatives they are undertaking, that they would have to be compensated. Therefore, there is an element of contempt in the manner in which this matter is being taken by the government of Kenya. And ultimately, in my view, is that therefore there's an element of so what I'm saying is this, that something from the president's point of view, besides the obvious illegality that is there in this matter, the critical bit that one should even be more concerned is that its patriotism is being called into question. For what reason? For this reason. If you love this country, Mr. President, there is no way you can conspire with an Indian fraudster to give him JKIA for 30 years. And even this Indian fraudster, it is also incumbent upon him to be a little bit smarter. For the simple reason is this, that you cannot invest in a country where everybody is saying we cannot take this kind of investment. And therefore, if Adani were to insist, and this should be made clear from the word go, if Adani insists on going ahead with this deal, and the GSU is deployed to protect him, to keep JKIA, this deal will definitely come to an end the day after Ruto leaves to power. This is going to happen sooner or later, 5 years, 10 years, but one day it will be happen. 30 years, Adani will never have JKIA. The next issue, in my view, is the question of taxation. The question of taxation, in my view, is important. Kenya Airports Authority is one of the few institutions in Kenya that actually pay tax. If you start selling the family jewel, capital, assets that raise capital and revenue for the government of Kenya, it will then mean that the tax burden on Kenyans is even going to increase, because the scenario is going to be this: only the people of Kenya would be raising whatever revenue is required by the government of Kenya. Yet, in a serious country, Safaricom, KAA, Kenya Pipeline, and other profit-making organizations, including Kenya Power, should be sharing the burden of taxation. And this is therefore unacceptable for that additional reasons. There is also the question that what is required to be done is that we can afford that money. The economics of it, that we shall not be able to build more airports for 30 years when all our neighbors are building airports, is completely unacceptable. And it is why you would wonder, now that in State House everybody is supposed to be taking tea, even when people are taking beer at State House, we never had this kind of insanity. And therefore Kenyans must rise against this. Finally, state power. In South Africa, we had Gupta. Kenyans must ensure that Adani is not going to be the Gupta during this time of Kenya Kwanza. And finally, to ODM. Raila Odinga, who has been a patriotic citizen of Kenya and leader, must openly tell William Ruto that JKIA is not available for Adani or any other gangster businessman who is a criminal. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed the discussion.
Kibe, Wakili Kibe, just before you drop, could we be looking at another golden bag scandal in the making?
This is worse than golden bag. Golden bag was just about some minerals, fake gold that was supposed to be exported. It was a small timer. The Adani thing, first of all, I need to emphasize that I believe, when I have read some of the clauses of the Adani deal, that the true issue, apart from the management of Adani, that is going to be managed for 30 years, I believe deep down, there are people who knows Adani will not be there for 30 years. But the trick is this: within 2 years or 1 year of Adani coming on board, Adani can sell 2,000 acres from whoever it wishes of JKIA land. Therefore, is another land grabbing. The land around JKIA is high value land. And I believe part of the deal of Adani is to transfer that land. So the deal could be, you make some money in the airport and you sell the land to the cowboys. This is why we must object to this. And this should be completely unacceptable. It is state capture of the worst character that one can ever have.
Thank you, Wakili.
I hope I've answered your question.
You have answered my question, and I just stay on. Mwero, before you
Yes, I'll stay on.
Before you come in, Mwero, I see Ekuru Okot is on the space, and I asked him a question, and he told me, Tony, we can stop this deal. Ekuru Okot, as you come in and tell us how to stop this deal, kindly take the mic.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks everyone for the space. Like I said, I hinted to you yesterday. You see, if a contract is bad and fraudulent, yes, it can take it to court and can be nullified. So I'm not so even worried about the fact. So we need to look at how good is this contract? Clearly, it is fraudulent. Even in terms of just how it was processed in the first place. How did we arrive here? You know, like I think I had was it Ndegwa who said that there ought to have been an expression of interest like we do in other projects. So that process, it wasn't followed in my view, even under our Public Procurement Act, which we all know. You know, there is a process laid down on how you secure certain projects. So if a contract is bad in law, like for example, that clause where that we cannot get out of it, there has to be an option for termination of a contract. If it isn't there, then it's not a valid contract. I'm sure Kibe and Ndegwa can confirm this. But having said that, can I make some 4 quick points?
Sure, Wakili.
Now, you see, I see this issue from a governance point of view. That how are we being governed as a people called Kenyans? You see, the first point for me is that this is a question about the rule of law, constitutionality, if you like. William Samuel Ruto never believed in the current constitution, and consequently, therefore, he does not believe in the rule of law. That is why you can see there is total disregard, disdain for court orders by the executive. If you look at, for example, the current issue about Masengeli, the Inspector General of Police. You see, the paradox is this, Tony. It is the police who, once they are given an order by the court to go and enforce, they will enforce it against a normal, ordinary Kenyan. But they themselves do not respect the rule of law. Masengeli was summoned 8 times. He sends his representatives. Now, the question sometimes I pose some of this most idiotic people in the space who say that we are being unfair to him. Would Lagat, for example, go and serve sentence on behalf of Masengeli? Once he's been convicted of contempt of court, he ought to come to court for conviction or to come and show cause why he should not be sent to jail. Now, that you can see all that in terms of disregard for court orders, disregard for the rule of law. I mean, the other example I can give is, for example, the deployment by William Ruto of our National Police Service to Haiti against the clear provisions of the Constitution and Article 240, and even the National Police Service Act. It's absolutely clear that there is a process. Should you require the deployment of Kenya Police Service, there has to be a request from a reciprocating country. To date, we have not seen that reciprocating country. There's a court order that bars the deployment of police officers to Haiti, but he decided to go it all the way. So we need to look at all these issues from the ambit of governance, rule of law, and whether actually William Ruto and his Kenya Kwanza government believes in the constitution. They don't. You will remember that he's one of the people who mounted a no campaign against this current constitution. So why are we surprised? So I am surprised, Kenyans are surprised that he's disregarding the rule of law and this constitution. Thirdly, I see it from the fact that the president disrespects the people of Kenya. He has no respect whatsoever for the people of Kenya. He thinks that Kenya is his chattel, our parastatals are his chattel, public spaces that are owned by Kenyans are his chattel. So it clearly shows that Chapter 6 under this administration appears to be a decoration. Why do I say this? Because if he occupies that office by dint of Chapter 6, you must show respect for the people. You must not demean that office. The president, not only is he demeaning his office by virtue of the fact that they went and negotiated this so-called takeover JKIA by a person who internationally is known as a fraudster. He has all the negative, you can describe in all the negative words. So what does that mean? In Kenya today, I can say that we are dealing with a very fraudulent leadership. And the last point I want to make is that it's now clear that government in Kenya is a business enterprise. It is not meant to serve the people of Kenya, but those people who are in government. So they want to capitalize, to monetize on the opportunities that's supposed to serve the people of Kenya. So that's my quick opening remarks and to my 4 points. I want to yield the mic.
Thank you, Wakili. The more you look at how this KK government rules, you find that it is true when they say this is a shareholding government. Everything in Kenya, from the deployment of our armed forces to Haiti, is a transaction, not for the country, but for the few. But as we think about that, I see nothing KEs on the space. So we can have nothing giving us your contribution. Marabu, Stock, then Joe, in that order.
Hello, everyone. As usual, I start by saluting the comrades we lost in the protest, the injured and the missing. I also want to thank you, Anthony and Mweru, for giving me the opportunity, and all the speakers and listeners. On this JKIA issue, this thing is horrible from every angle you look at it, and I'm glad that the lawyers are here to help us expound on the issues. The number one mistake he made, he removed the visa option, which I've looked up, and it was giving the country around 640 million a year. Was it necessary? Yet Kenyans, we have to pay for visas in majority of countries. I don't think, even where it's visa free, at the point of entry, there's a price you pay, there's a fee you pay. So why was it necessary if the issue is resources? Why did they remove that? Before that, KAA, it was during actually the former regime, KAA had a lot of money collected from the parking fee. I remember when it burned, and Honorable Sakaja was alluding they should use the funds collected, because apparently that kitty had not been touched for a very long time, and it was a lot of money. I will look up exactly how many billions it was and post. And they said, no, they're not allowed to use the money for the renovation after the fire. And then now I'm hearing them say, oh, you have seen that they were leaking roofs. There are contractors in Kenya and engineers who can do the repair work. When you look at the deal, it's a very disrespectful approach to handing over our national asset, because the security of a country is guarded through the border security. And for that reason, even the military should take interest and oppose this particular deal. But that notwithstanding, the state law office is supposed to help the government scrutinize our contracts and advise the government on what to follow through with and what to reject, and clauses that should be included in a contract. But in this case, I'm wondering, was the state law office consulted? Did they facilitate this particular deal? Because the reason why we are calling it a deal and not a contract, the information came from a patriotic whistleblower. Imagine if Amenya, who we celebrate today, did not blow the whistle. What would have happened to JKIA? So I don't think they came to the table with clean hands. I don't think we should pay damages towards Adani, because as a national security asset should not be handed to a foreigner, and worse still, to someone who has zero reputation in different countries, and not even far back in the years. Currently is being opposed in Canada and in his home country. So why would you want to align yourself with such a company? So it looks like, and even when I saw today that they want an escalation of this clause of conflict of interest to be removed, I realized very quickly Kenya is going to become a private enterprise, because why would a sitting government remove a clause that is supposed to guard the assets of the country? He swore an oath to protect the sovereignty of a country. why are we seeing part of the rule of law? There's the issue of agriculture, livestock, there's everything. Basically, it's like we are facing an imminent collapse. That said, it looks like he's not actually interested in running the country. And in the event that he's not, is it possible for him to resign? And in the event that he resigned, what is the way forward? And I don't think we should stop at it, because Kenyans have become like firefighters. We have an issue every other week. I remember they had mentioned that KICC can rake a lot of revenue if at all it is leased to a multinational company. Now it's time for us as Kenya to be proactive and look at what is the actual status of JKIA, because now they're saying, oh, it was a proposal. We need to know where is the title, what is the actual status at KICC, and also what is it, KPLC. I looked at some videos where Julius Malema was explaining how when you go to bed with the West, they make you give away your national asset, the most profitable of them. And now we can see KA, because JKA was not
One
making
second.
losses.
My apologies for interrupting you, nothing. But we have so many speakers requesting, and a lot of people have pressing questions for their lawyers. So when you guys have you as speakers, please keep it at 4 minutes so people can have a chance. Now that we have 3 lawyers on the panel, a lot of people have legal questions they want to ask in regards to this Adani deal.
Thank you, Meru.
Okay,
And
on
nothing, just 1
that
minute.
note, I wish to land.
Okay, 1 minute. As you do that, I'll also take 2 minutes to go through the people who have sent their questions through through messaging. And someone has asked me to ask what is the implication of the meeting between the CS and the KAA workers. Does it have any implications in what will be going forward in terms of this deal? Ndegwa or any lawyer can answer that. Does it stop anything now that the KAA staff have said they're okay and they have done their strike?
Tony, I pass over to my seniors.
Okay, Kibe or a cool workout in your view?
I think I think the issue of JKIA is a matter that is bigger than employment. Employment is actually one of the smaller issues. Of course, it is a personal issue to those people who work for KAA. It is very easy for their concerns to be addressed and told that you are going to be retained on whatever terms and conditions that you are working for the time being. The bigger question still would remain that this kind of national asset cannot just be given for 30 pieces of silver, which is what is happening. KAA, anybody who wants to invest in Kenya is a very big country with only 1 or 3 or 4 functional airports. Other countries, smaller ones like Denmark, have even up to 10 airports. So we have a lot of land that Adani and any other rich man from India or UAE can come and be given land to do an airport. But whilst there is no other airport, and whilst this is making some revenue for the Kenyan people, they are entitled to keep it, and a very clear discussion in which people are not pocketing money to sell the country's jewel is going to be undertaken. But for the time being, that discussion has not taken place, and therefore this thing should actually be called off completely until the discussion has taken place as to what needs to be sold and what should go first. In my view, JKIA can only go last.
So we have a few people who have requested, but it looks like we're having a technical issue. If you're requesting for the mic, please drop and request again because we're not able to see them. So there's something I wanted to go over about this Public Participation Act. There's a few people who are here who are listening that maybe have not had a chance to review it. And according to this Public Participation Act, there's Section 37 that stipulates how PPPs can be acquired. And what some of them that are listed there are procurement, private initiated proposal, competitive bidding, restrictive bidding. Those are some of them that are listed. So this Adani deal, from my understanding, is a private initiated proposal. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, for the lawyers that are here, does that honestly explain why there was no competitive bidding or restrictive bidding that was part of this deal making?
Is that a question, Muero? Because someone
Yeah,
else has asked.
because there's
Yeah.
been a lot of I've seen a lot of conversation about why there was no bidding that was presented, but after reviewing this act under Section 37, it stipulates, it sort of answers my question, but I sort of wanted clarification from the lawyers here.
And just to join that, because someone else has asked the same question, but he said, is it possible for Kenyans to know who else presented the PIP and who are the Kenyan shareholders in the Adani in the Adani LLC? Those two questions. So Ekuru or Kibe, any of you lawyers can take that question.
I think Ekuru can have that, or if he doesn't, I can take it.
Go ahead, Kibe.
There seems to be two questions. Number one, it is true that you can do a privately initiated proposal, PIP. But even when that is done, the procedure, and I think I'm aware of some of the facts which you cannot detail all of them right now, the procedure under which that would have to take place is that this fact must be announced to the people of Kenya even before it goes to cabinet, and we must have time to evaluate whether on what basis KAA would even be available for purposes of such an arrangement. Because as we are saying, even at the family level, it is not everything that is available for sale, even if something must be sold. Issue number two, about whether or not we can know who are the partners of Adani in this deal. All these kind of things are done for that reason. They are matters pending in court. The laws requires that every person who is going to benefit from whatever transaction that is of this nature must be disclosed. What are their identities? So this is going to be possible. But this is not, for me, the most important issue. The most important issue for the time being is that we learned about this deal when it had progressed considerably. Cabinet appeared to have met secretary and appeared to have said we have received this deal from Adani and just communicate to the people of Kenya. The cabinet exercise public power, including the president, that this is property that belongs to the people of Kenya. So you cannot receive a proposal of that nature. You pretend to give reasons. You don't even tell the representatives of the people, which is parliament. Even if parliament some time back had said that they will leave the president and the CS treasury to sell Kenyan property the way in which they want, they exercise delegated legislation. And therefore, in circumstances where you have a parliament that is a rubber stamp and has actually passed a law not to be involved in important decisions for the country, it becomes incumbent for the people of Kenya to be directly consulted on whether or not these kind of deals are going to be approved. And if they are not consulted, it is my considered view that would fail under Article 10 of the Constitution, because we are talking here about public property and a matter of national prestige and a high value public asset. It must be dealt with in a more responsible manner. It is not a matter of small technicalities of whether a certain law has been followed strictly or not. It is a fundamental question of whether in the first place this should be taking place, and if at all, with a fraudster businessman from India.
So, if you can allow me just to add to what Kibe has said, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sure.
So, for example, under the Public Procurement Act, and even read it together with that PPP, you see, there has to be exceptions. Why are you basically almost like this is almost like direct procurement? What is the urgency in actually going ahead to say we need Adani? And normally, even when you go for that kind of arrangement, you will have to consider a number of other interested parties. So you do what we call targeted. So it's like a head hunting. So you say, okay, Adani or another person who is an expert in this, we want you to give us a proposal on this, but you have to demonstrate the urgency to it. In the absence of urgency, then the normal legal process follows. But over and above that, we are not just dealing with any need of an institution. This is about Kenya. This is a security installation. It's a public property. So you cannot privately procure a public property. You have to follow the process. In any case, honestly, like Kibe has said, Kenya is too big. If today, for example, you wanted to build another airport, we'll probably build an airport, say, in Isiolo, a very world-class airport, and encourage tourists to fly directly to Isiolo to climb Mount Kenya, go to the Aberdares, and do a safari. But this, where is the need? Where is the urgency? In law, that they failed that test. Over to you, Mwero.
Interesting that you say that, Ekuru. And before we come back to you, Mwero, I don't know whether you have anything to add before we bring in Tony Gashoka and Marabu Stock in that order.
Yes, I do. Under Section 40 of this this act, actually, Section 41, where we talk about the due diligence that has to be conducted in order for a PIP to be approved. A lot of this, Adani is already. I don't think they conducted any due diligence, honestly, because it says pretty well a private party cannot be debarred from any other country for participating in PPS. It cannot be corrupt, sued, or convicted on any acts of corruption. It has to be tax compliant and is not on any default in terms of payments, cannot have any legal proceedings or bankruptcies, cannot be convicted of any crimes. I mean, we are all very fully aware, and it's public knowledge and information of all the crimes that this company has been plagued with. So, I mean, when we talk about violations of just this act itself that they seem to have engineered to help them with this kind of theft, it's already been violated. So, for the lawyers here, please respond to this. So, is this going to also help? And I know one of the lawyers, Ikuro Court, mentioned that he's almost certain that this is going to get voided. Is this one of the things that you guys are also bearing in mind when it comes to this lawsuit and petitions?
I confirm that in the case that was filed, I've seen those arguments by KHRC and the Law Society of Kenya. So thank you very much for your understanding of the law, and those are legitimate issues, and they are already part of the judicial review case that was filed on behalf of the Law Society of Kenya.
Thank you very much, Wakili Kibe. Tony, I wanted to bring you in so that we take two questions, a question from Marabu Stock and Joe. Then we can drop the speakers and bring in some more speakers because we have a very hot mic today.
Well, good evening, everybody. I wanted to talk about this concept of corruption, which is actually very well perfected by William Ruto, who trained very well under the KANU regime. You know, corruption is, or what you call government corruption, is budgeted. So ordinarily, what you do is you get a need for a project, you give it a monetary figure, you put it in the budget through the treasury, the ministry advertises a tender, you shortlist a person that you have identified, then you award the tender, they go ahead and do the job, and then you pay. That is normally the way in which looting ordinarily happens in the normal course of business in government, budgeted corruption. As corruption has become more and more difficult to hide and has taken longer and longer because of the public's appetite for scrutiny and public participation, looters and crooks and fraudsters have had to improve their ability to heist and to steal. And most of the avenues left are now external. If you look at the SGR, for example, a lot of the looting of the SGR is external. A lot of the money stolen there is through insurance. People in Kenya do not actually know, because it is not something you ordinarily think about in corruption. How much insurance is paid per year on SGR? How much insurance is paid in terms of reinsuring the risk of SGR to Munich Re or Lloyd's of London or whoever else? These are sophisticated upper class ways of corruption. And what is scary about the Jomo Kenyatta heist under the Adani group is the sophisticated nature of it, that it is seeking not just a strategic asset, but an asset that is earning dollars and euros that cannot be accounted for to the naked eye, that its revenues are invisible. People forget that over 200 tons of horticulture products are exported every day from Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, and those are legal horticultural products. What about those that are not legal, that go through aircrafts worldwide? I mean, if you go to the US-Mexico border, the narcotic trade is bigger than the economy of Africa together, because the narcotics that cross the border of the US and Mexico are in the billions of dollars. So if you have an unregulated Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, don't look at the land, and as Kibe Senior had said, my friend in the struggle for many years, yes, there is land and they can sell the land, but there are also sophisticated things that they have calculated that are beyond the naked eye. That is just cargo. When you look at why duty-free shops and all these things have been a problem in Kenya ever since the time of Kamlesh Patni and the World Duty-Free sagas, it was because that is revenue that is recurrent and that is not accountable, because you cannot count it. You cannot be able to quantify it. You just put it in the pocket. As it becomes more and more difficult in Kenya to steal in national assets because of public scrutiny. Now, I want to say some issues that Mweru was raising as to why lawyer Njiru and I have decided to go to the court for a constitutional interpretation. As Kibe will tell you, the LSK went for a judicial review mechanism that is going to question the propriety of the deal between the Kenya Airports Authority and Adani, and whether or not it's a good deal, whether it was done properly, whether or not it stands the test of a public, award in the normal provisions of the law. But we, in our constitutional reference, are rising on the mountaintop of public concern, public interest in saying that the sovereignty of the people of Kenya, including public participation, is a prerequisite on all things, including gems like Jomo Kenyatta International Airport that are so important to the total citizenry of Kenya, that it cannot be even entered into any discussion without the participation of the public and the consent thereof. And our constitutional reference is asking the court to say that everything else is a nullity, in the same way they said the BBI was a nullity because the BBI did not originate from the common person. And it will be interesting to see whether the court will bite as to our demand that the sovereignty of the people is important in governance. Because if the sovereignty of the people through public participation, as was vested through the Bomas negotiations in the public, if that is upheld, it means that the public can continue And that's why I had invited Morara today to come and tell us what he's doing going around the country, because if public scrutiny on public projects continues, it means that stealing public assets becomes difficult because the public are not involved. And if the public are involved, then that theft can be mitigated or stopped. And therefore, for me, the question here will be whether the courts will say that the public must be involved. And if the public say that they are not involved, and if they feel that the threshold has not been met, whether or not that contract can stand. And as Kibe has said, if it was to stand through authoritarianism, it will be a nullity later by succeeding governments. Now, where are we now in terms of the country and in terms of this Andani issue? I think because of the online petition and because of the Kenyans coming up every day on this issue, it is becoming very murky for Andani and William Ruto to close this deal, simply because the fine print of the deal would require what I am saying, the issue of exporting the theft of money from Kenya's borders to India. As you know, this is why this deal is being externalized. It's been externalized so that the amount of money that is divided is not divided here under the Controller and Auditor General, but divided by the accountants of Adani. I don't want to speak anything beyond there, but to say that I'm putting a challenge to my brother Kibe to join with Ndegwa and Njiru, because we need not just a review of the Andani deal. We need a constitutional pronouncement by the court that this deal is null and void ab initio, because it does not benefit the public, and in fact it negates public interest. I want to stop there for now.
Thank you, Tony, for that very wonderful submission. And I'll just echo something you said as I bring in Joe and Marabu Stock to ask their question that give us their submission. That what we try to do every Wednesday on Point Blank is we try to build a team that when Kenyans come to this space and give us their submissions, we try to be part of the solution of solving that problem that that is really ailing this country. So, Joe, you're next. What is your question or what is your comment on this matter? If Joe is not ready, Marabu Stock, you can, if you're ready.
Good evening, Tony.
Okay, Joe.
Evening, everyone. Mine is a question I would like to put to the senior councils and including my good friend Ndegwa Njiru. Adani in Australia is, I think, a persona non grata at the moment. You go to India, there is a stock manipulations. Is there a way we can ban Adani from doing business, any business, even currently the PIP he has also on Ketraco? Is it possible we put an end to the name Adani in Kenya through the courts? That's my humble submission to the senior council. That's what I would like to know.